How you doing everyone, it's Jordan here. Now today we have a review of Senren Banka. Why? Well, because it's just released on the Nintendo Switch like today or yesterday or tomorrow, one of those days. But yeah, we thought we'd give it a review. This is the Steam version, just so you know, but yeah, we thought we'd do a review in anticipation of the Switch release. This review was written by Miguel Marin, the main man. Go follow him on Twitter with the links in the description. These are his words, not mine. Let's see what he thinks. If one were to list the most acclaimed romance visual novel developers, it's quite likely that the name Yuzusoft would pop up. This is a studio well known for titles such as Sanoba Witch, Dracu Riot, and Senren Banka, which incidentally just got its Nintendo Switch release. This marks the first time a game of theirs has been released on a console in the West. But is this release truly worth celebrating? Let's find out with today's review of Senren Banka. The plot begins when the protagonist, Masaomi, travels to Hori, a rural town that seems to be stuck in the past due to its isolation from the outside world. It is, however, for that reason that it became a well-known hot spring spot for tourists wanting a more traditional feeling vacation. Among its attractions is the legendary Murasame Maru, a sword stuck in a stone which to this day nobody has managed to pull out. Or at least that was until Masaomi, after being slightly urged to give it a shot, accidentally breaks it in half. He then decides to take responsibility for his actions and is consequently appointed as the fiancé of the shrine's Miko, Yoshino. But that's not where the unexpected developments end, as the sword itself was seemingly being possessed by a spirit who can only be seen by very few select people, and now calls Masaomi her new master. The story itself is a nice blend between your usual romance comedy scenes seen in this type of game and more plot-focused sections, with quite a few action scenes here and there as well. But what Yuzusoft truly excels in is presenting a chill and relaxed atmosphere, and this game is no exception. There's something truly captivating about it which makes long reading sessions never too tiring. On top of that, when the game gets cute and fluffy, it gets really freaking cute and really bloody fluffy. Similar to other games in this genre, there are some comedy bits where the characters are represented by chibi depictions of themselves, and in my opinion, it is these moments where the game is at its best. They will make anyone with half a heart smile like a total idiot. That being said, they do become a bit less frequent during some of the main characters' routes, which is unfortunate, but this feeling only serves to speak volumes for their actual quality. And speaking of characters, let's move on to their roots. Each one is similarly designed, exploring both the respective heroines' troubles alongside a facet of mystery surrounding the town. The drama itself is fairly thin. In fact, it doesn't take that long within the route until the main character and occasionally the girl herself profess their love. Luckily, even if the protagonist's personality is on the blander side, he isn't the usual thickhead that slows down the plot for no good reason, or at least he isn't to an irritating degree. As for the girls themselves, they are all deeply likable with their own quirks and charms. There's a total of 4 main routes, with a couple more that can be unlocked after clearing any of the 4 main ones. Starting with Yoshino, she's the shrine maiden as well as the heroine who seems to be pushed as the main girl doing the common route. She's probably the one with the best romantic development out of all the 4 girls, mostly because she is given the most character growth during the common route, making her eventual romantic attraction towards the main protagonist quite believable. As such, her route is strongly focused on the fluffiness, which while it can get slightly repetitive, she's likable enough that it never becomes a main issue. Moving on to Murasame, the spirit that dwelled in the sword, her route has a very clear thematic to it, focusing on topics such as isolation and loneliness. This makes her development during her route truly stand out, more so than Yoshino's. And she also has really fun chemistry with our protagonist, with lots of banter and other scenes where they poke fun at each other. Without going into spoilers, there was one story beat that I felt could have been given a bit more build up, but overall, her route was certainly one of the best routes of the game. Mako's route, on the other hand, while not bad by any means, was, in some aspects, slightly underwhelming. On the positive side of things, the relation between the mystery and her own personal troubles was very coherently presented, which gave the routes a nice pacing to it, and the comedy-focused scenes were really amusing. But I was left with the feeling that some of Mako's characterizations were somewhat underused. In particular, I think it could have done with more jokes related to her ninja abilities. Still, I believe there were plenty of entertaining moments to justify giving it a read if you like her as a character. The final main heroine is Lena, a transfer student studying from abroad. As a foreigner, she often struggles with growing accustomed to Japanese culture and the language itself. She's also not that good with the more naughty side of things, and the scenes where she becomes flustered were simply adorable, in great part thanks to her amazing voice actress. Surprisingly enough, her route is the one that delves the deepest into the mystery surrounding the village. As a result, it ends up being a more plot-focused route than the others, which gives it a really unique feel. As a whole, I think it was one of the better put-together routes of the entire game. Outside of these 4 routes, there's also the aforementioned unlockable routes, those being Koharu and Roka's routes. These 2 routes are shorter than the others and not nearly as in-depth either. Even the first 2 hours or so are shared between the 2, only properly splitting into 2 after that. And once the split happens, it goes into turbo mode with barely any development, just a handful of slice of life scenes and that's it. They are what they are, an extra addition, which honestly, even if they might be a bit shallow in their inclusion, is more than welcomed, as it is common for games of this genre to leave fans wanting more. No matter how you look at it in terms of content, this game is indeed comprehensive, maybe to the point of suffering an embarrassment of riches, because things might get exhausting if you try to read all of it. There's also a few similar scenes that appear in different routes almost identically, which further reinforces the sense of repetition. It is for that reason that I would recommend only focusing on routes from the girls you really care about, rather than trying to complete absolutely everything. In terms of presentation, this game is just top-notch. In particular, the sprite usage is nothing short of excellent. Not only are they extremely rich in expression, but the way they dramatically change mid-line to match the tone of the dialogue is absolutely fantastic, and helps bring a lot of charm and personality to all of the characters. The engine itself also has quite a few neat features up its sleeve, such as a nifty in-game flowchart and the ability to save individual voice lines. I also want to applaud the language options, as I think they really are as good as they can be, in particular being able to display 2 languages at the same time. It was extremely helpful to check the state of the translation, and speaking of which, I have to say I was fairly impressed by it. In particular, they managed to maintain the register of the dialogue exceedingly well, which when done incorrectly could have been a deal breaker for characters such as Murasame. There were also some puns that surprisingly were faithfully translated while being equally funny and clever. Admittedly, some scenes, especially during Lena's route where they focused on the Japanese language, did come across as a bit weird, but it was either that or completely rewriting them, so it's hardly a complaint. If I were to nitpick, I think that there were some words regarding Japanese culture that could have been left untranslated. The game already does so by leaving words such as Oni-chan intact and keeping honorifics, so I don't see why other words such as yobai or dogeza couldn't have received the same treatment. But really, this is a minuscule and personal complaint from what is a very remarkable translation job. But of course, now that the game has a Switch release, the question is how much has been altered and how much would you be missing by playing it on a console rather than on your PC. While we did not have access to the Switch version itself since we didn't receive a review copy, we can more or less guess what was cut from it. First of all, obviously all the H scenes have been cut to basically no one's surprise. I personally don't see this as a major loss, as they didn't bring anything important to the plot or the character's development. The issue is instead with some of the scenes outside of those events, especially considering that the Steam All Ages version did cut a few that were important for the plot. In this regard, I wouldn't worry too much. Judging by a couple of published articles where they show CGs belonging to the Switch port, it was clear that a few of them were further altered to be approved for console release. And while this might sound like an even worse situation amid those altered CGs, there were a couple that were completely removed from the Steam All Ages version. This means that the scenes, unless you apply the adult patch, were missing in the Western PC version, and they've now been added back, making this a perfectly fine way to experience the story. And just to reiterate, we don't 100% know this as a fact, but it is the likely outcome. Overall, the final verdict, Senren Banka is a highly polished and enjoyable romantic comedy with a nice traditional Japanese flavour to it. Its chill atmosphere alongside the charming cast of characters make this game a pleasant read throughout. Admittedly, reading all this game has to offer can eventually get tiring, and some routes aren't as engaging as others, but as a whole, it's still a worthwhile time for fans of this type of visual novel. A 7.5 out of 10. Thanks to Marion, as always, for writing this review. Check out him over on Twitter with the link in the description. Will you be picking up Senren Banka on the Switch, or will you be going for the PC release and unlocking those hit scenes? Do let me know in the comments. Please check out some of our other stuff. We've got a lot of stuff going out this week. It's all here on the screen for you right now, so go check those out. Be sure you're subscribed and click that little bell button if you're a visual novel fan. If you don't, you're not. Take care.